Welcome into Hand Raised Guys, presented by Comer Heating and Air, Southern Air Conditioning and Heating. Getting this to you guys early on a Thursday because there's a good bit of content that's kind of timely. There's some NFL draft content coming your way. I talked to Eric Edholm of Yahoo Sports a little bit earlier this afternoon as I'm recording this on a Thursday afternoon. And then late Wednesday, I talked to Chris Lee of Southeastern 14. Get you ready for another weekend of SEC baseball, big weekend as the every team in the league will hit the midway point by the end of the weekend. Most of the series starting Thursday evening, including Ole Miss at South Carolina. A couple series starting on Friday, ending on Sunday, but most everybody is a Thursday, Friday, Saturday series. So we'll get you ready for those. Also talk about his story about the Tennessee Volunteers, the bat controversy of sorts that hit them a couple weeks ago. So we'll talk about that. Chris had a really big story last week on Southeastern 14 that didn't get as much traction as I think it probably should have, but that story's not dead. So there's a lot of season left, and you'll suspect be hearing about that story more as the season goes on. We're coming to you as brought to you, I should say, by Comer Heating and Air, Southern Air Conditioning and Heating. It's the same great products, same great services, same people, just different names. If you're in the Oxford, Tupelo area, get in touch with Comer, 662-801-1777. If you're in Hernando, Memphis, DeSoto County, that area, get in touch with the people at Southern, 662-429-4429. Great customer service. Listen, it's about to get warm. If you have not cranked up the AC just yet, consistently, you're probably going to be doing it soon. And even if it's kind of working, when it gets really hot, you want to make sure that air conditioner's ready to roll, your Freon levels are right, all of those things. Get in touch with Comer, get in touch with Southern, and make sure that you're ready to go. And in the event that you have a problem, those are the people you need to call. Comer and Southern, they'll take great care of you. Tremendous products and great customer service. They've helped us late on a Friday, helped us on a Sunday, helped us when we've had AC issues, and our house had the AC issues. The upstairs went out one year. The downstairs went out right behind it. So we've been dealing with Comer here in Oxford for a while. Eric Payne and all the people there are fantastic, and they'll be great for you as well. So, again, Comer Heating and Air, Southern Air Conditioning and Heating. I'm coming to you from the Clark Ford Studios. Clark Ford's in Amory, Mississippi, 662-257-1900. Get in touch with my buddy Corey Clark. Tell Corey what Ford product you're looking for. He'll send you a quote within 15 minutes in business hours, right to the bottom line. No hassle, no haggle. You get your quote. The rest completely up to you. You can shop that quote around. You can do what I've done, what I recommend that you do, and that's hop into a Clark Ford today. 662-257-1900. Great products, great services. Corey wants to be your car guy. He wants to be a truck guy. I'll prove to you what that means when you make the call. Again, 662-257-1900. Eric Edholm, Chris Lee join on the Rafters Music and Food Hotline. Rafters, Music and Food on the Square in Oxford. Great place to grab a burger, a po' boy, an appetizer, watch some of the games over the course of this weekend, and then obviously for coming up next weekend for the Grove Bowl, for the Mississippi State Series, for Double Decker, all of that going on in Oxford next weekend. Make sure you make Rafters a part of your weekend if you get a chance. A great beer selection, full bar and more there at Rafters on the Square in Oxford and Rafters in New Albany. So I talked NFL Draft, New Orleans Saints, Matt Corral, Sam Williams, Chance Campbell, Jerry and Ely, Snoop Connor, Malik Willis. Talked about a lot of different topics here in the next 20-some-odd minutes with Eric Edholm, longtime friend of mine at Yahoo Sports. Coincidentally, the first ever guest on the Oxford Exxon podcast. If you're listening to this late Thursday or early Friday as part of the Oxford Exxon podcast, there's the answer to your trivia question. Here is Eric Edholm on the Rafters Music and Food Hotline. My longtime friend Eric Edholm, Yahoo Sports, kind enough to join us here. I can only imagine how slammed you are, so I'll sort of get right to it because I don't want to eat up too much of your time. But it's the question that a lot of Ole Miss people, I think, are asking, and you know how this is. People at the draft, you're in love with the guys you cheered for that wore your uniform and all of that stuff. And Matt Corral had two really great seasons, including one historic season at Ole Miss, leading Ole Miss to the Sugar Bowl and deciding to play in the game, which I think endeared him even further to the fans and that kind of thing, Eric. And then these mock drafts come out with, Matt Corral falling, I think, just picking one that I just happened to see this morning. Mel Kiper had him 49th, the second round of the Saints. And you hear a lot of talk about people trying to aggressively trade up from Malik Willis and Kenny Pickett going in front. Where does Matt Corral's market, where is it sort of settling right now, a week away from the draft, in your opinion?
Yeah. And I mean, just using Willis as a launching point, obviously anybody who watched the Liberty Ole Miss game might come away thinking, I think you might have the wrong quarterback here, right? But the NFL is such a traits-driven league when it comes to that position, especially, but at every other spot too. And, I think in a lot of ways would rather take the scratch-off ticket, what's behind door number 2, if you will, and Willis being – a very toolsy player, but an unrefined one at this point, over somebody like Corral, who, played, 3+ seasons and I think showed obviously good athleticism, respectable arm talent, won some big games, completed a high percentage of his passes, cut down on the interceptions that were a big, kind of bugaboo in certain games in 2020. Obviously, I think it was the LSU and the Arkansas games that immediately come to mind, but traits wise, it's not like we're talking about a guy who doesn't have anything. He's just a smaller frame guy. The question about, whether he's going to be susceptible to injuries is obviously there. The ankle injuries, the repeated ankle injuries, something that has, been mentioned in the scouting process, obviously. And arm wise, I don't think it's special, but he's got a nice, tight, quick release. And, we saw some similarities to Zach Wilson, at least in play style, and Wilson went number 2 last year. So you can make a case that he's underrated in a lot of aspects. I think some people are worried, he may not be as effective a runner on the NFL level. Yes, he can scramble and buy time and all that, but there was obviously some character stuff that came up, mostly from his past, mostly from, the high school days and in the early part of his life, but he's been really transparent about that. I appreciate that. He had a long chat with me about, mental wellness and, addressing his own issues and being forthright with himself and with his family and his teammates. And, Lane Kiffin, I know they've built a crazy good relationship over the past couple of years. So, there's a lot to like, but I do think that ultimately you could probably start the clock late in round 1 on him, with teams wanting to get that 5th-year option for a quarterback. It's a possibility. You could see him go in round 2. I don't think he'll go after somebody like Sam Howell, but I don't know that he goes before Desmond Ridder. I think Desmond Ridder is viewed as maybe a little bit safer of a prospect, which goes against the traits thing, but he's also a premier athlete. So, it's a balancing scale here, and people have to decide how high a ceiling they see for a player like Corral and when's the time to pull a trigger. But I think it's somewhere between 25 and 55 overall.
You mentioned Lane Kiffin. It's interesting. Lane's obviously coached a lot of quarterbacks as a head coach at USC, as a coordinator at Alabama, now Matt Corral at Ole Miss. And I hear this kind of a whisper a little bit talking to people that are NFL people. It's like, yeah, well, Kiffin's such a good play caller.
Right.
And he really sees, people talk about Lane Kiffin, the play caller. Forget the Joey Freshwater crap and all that. They talk about just Lane Kiffin, the game day football coach. It's almost like awe. It's like this guy's like Rain Man. I mean, he just sees stuff. And they're like, he was able to protect Corral. He was able to give him these one read, boom, get the ball out of your hand. There's a play.
That's right.
And that worked at Ole Miss, but what if he's playing for the Lions, or he's playing for the Panthers or the Falcons or the Saints or whoever, right? And you've got to go through progressions, and there's not Lane Kiffin right there with real time. Here's the hand. Here's the card. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
you're having to play poker without knowing the cards a little bit. Is that a fair criticism, or is that something that just gets brought up in this 4-month period where the NFL analyzes everything?
Yeah, I never like when there are, just generalizations are thrown out there and they should apply to all situations. But in this particular case, I think there's some merit to it, because I think when plays broke down and Corral didn't transition into a scrambler, there were some questions about how he played outside of structure. The decision-making wasn't quite as good and crisp. And, a lot of people will say, how do you go from completing 59% of his, I want to say it's around 59 in 2019. Now, granted, he was rotating with John Reese, and I think there are a lot of people who say, Kiffin really kind of unlocked something, and it was his system. You see guys running free down the field, and these are easy throws that most quarterbacks can make because it's schemed up by the brainiac. And so, he throws the play sheet up in the air before the ball touches the receiver's hand, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
There's no doubt that plays into it. And so I think with Corral and you just want to be able to teach him your offensive system wherever he ends up going. See what he can do when plays break down, when the protection isn't perfect, when the receiver stumbles off the line, whatever it may be, right? Or there's an unexpected blitz or somebody drops that you're not anticipating. Whatever situation that comes up, whatever everyone says makes Tom Brady so great is he's a lightning fast thinker. He's played out every scenario in his mind. That's, I think, where people will say, here's where Matt Corral needs work or needs time. And experience isn't gained overnight. So that applies to Malik Willis with Hugh Freeze. That certainly applies to, Pitt had a very well-called offense last year, so you could say it applies to Pickett, and Sam Howell certainly with Phil Longo's offense. It definitely isn't something unique to him, but I think it absolutely is fair to bring it up in his case and say, we just don't know if that's the kind of player he'll be, or if he'll need a really rigid structure to play within in the NFL.
Along those lines, and I haven't heard too many people kind of ask the question this way. I'm sure you have, because you've talked to everybody. Is there beyond the money? Obviously, you'd love to be the first pick in the draft, and you get all the money in your pocket, and you're all good. Money aside, which I realize is quite a caveat, but money aside, is there a great scenario for Matt long term? Is there a franchise or two that you look at, Eric, and you go, you know what, he would be really a good fit there? We were talking on the Thursday Oxford Exxon podcast about, we just took Kuiper's mock draft and said, let's just play that out, and it was going 49th to the Saints in the second round, where obviously he wouldn't walk in as a starter, and there wouldn't be a lot of pressure for him in that scenario. Would that be a good fit, in that city, in that system where he was behind Winston for at least a year with the chance to, I think where I'm going here. Is there a bit or two that you look at and go, that would be good for him, where he's in the league 8-10 years from now?
Yeah. And I think that's ideally where he lands, is somewhere where there isn't an expectation to start from day one. I think that will exist for whatever team drafts Kenny Pickett, assuming he goes in round one, which I expect him to. But, Malik Willis, I think everybody kind of knows coming in, okay, you're buying high, but in 2 or 3 years, they're expecting more, and he may not be able to play right away. So with Corral, it's sort of somewhere in the middle a little bit. And I think, you certainly look at Atlanta with Marcus Mariota, who's, serviceable. He's played for Arthur Smith before, that sort of thing. But there's no way that you're saying Mariota's locked into this job for 2-3 years. It's fluid. The idea is that he technically could be benched, sometime in 2022. He might hold the job all season, and then they open the door after the year. Or perhaps a rookie gets a week 17 or 18 start to audition for next year and get a jump on that if they're out of contention. So, yeah, a team like New Orleans or Atlanta. I think New Orleans is interesting, but the conversations I've had with people who kind of are familiar with their thinking is that they're almost seeming aggressive to the point where they feel like they can compete this year. Matt Ryan's out of the division. Tom Brady's coming back, but there's no guarantee at his age that he can keep up his incredible pace. All we have is 20 plus years of evidence, but still, Carolina's in kind of a weird spot. They don't really have their preferred starting quarterback. So, I will say the only caveat with the Saints is that, they have the 2 first-round picks, and they may be aggressive to the point where they work themselves out of the ability to draft him based on where they're picking. So, yes, in theory, it would be a nice place with Winston, or, I think Atlanta makes a lot of sense. Washington would certainly be on that list. Carson Wentz, his future is undecided yet. So somewhere where there's a starter in place, but maybe one who doesn't have too tight a grip on that job long-term would be ideal for him.
There's been talk about the Saints being aggressive at packaging those picks and trading up. There's a lot of Saints fans in our audience, obviously. Do you see that as a scenario, or do you think it's more likely they kind of hang where they are and use those picks to draft guys who could fit holes now?
Yeah, I mean, I think I could see it both ways, right? You could argue they need a left tackle. You could argue they need a wide receiver. You could argue that the future of the quarterback position is unknown, right, past this year. Even arguably at some point during this year. Defensively, I think most boxes are checked off. You still want a little more depth, but you look at what they did late in the season to the Bucks. Most of those contributors are back next year. I mean, it's Dennis's team. I mean, that's obviously going to be kind of their bread and butter in a lot of respects, along with, Kamara and Michael Thomas, if he's, back to where we expect him to be. So, yeah, I would argue that if there's a more immediate need, it would probably be a tackle and receiver. And I think both those positions arguably could have early runs. Tackle could begin right away at like 3, 3, 4, 5. Those teams all would make sense for drafting an offensive lineman. A couple teams after that in the top 10 and the early teens. So, do they have a player they love? Is Charles Cross somebody who reminds them enough of Teron Armstead to where they can move up and feel good about it? Maybe. Is there a receiver they feel could be the perfect complement to Thomas or stand up as a number one if he's not on the roster a year from now? Maybe, because that receiver market I think will be hot once the match is lit. Once the first one goes off the board, I think the next 10 picks or so we could see another 5 or 6 receivers go off the board. So the action will be pretty fast at both positions if those are the ones they're looking at.
Yeah, Eric has a story at Yahoo Sports about a run on wide receivers that likely to come in the first round. That is along those, and that's how the draft works. I mean,
yeah,
there's, if you've ever done a fantasy football draft or a fantasy baseball draft, you go in with a plan sometimes, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, all right, he took a shortstop. I got to go get a shortstop.
It's time, right? And especially look at the crazy contracts that have been issued this year. I mean, at that position, it used to be quarterback, right? You draft a quarterback in round 1 to save money at the position. It's a step back, but you hope they're good long term. Wide receiver is almost getting in that level. We have 9 off the top of my head, wide receivers making $20 million or more on average per year.
It's such an impactful position. I mean, you talked about Ja'Marr Chase and the impact that he had on the Bengals. Everyone talks about Joe Burrow, and deservedly so, but Ja'Marr Chase was a game changer for that.
No doubt.
That team. He was one of the huge reasons that they were in position to make a Super Bowl run. Yep. You don't have a lot of more time, so let me get to a couple more things that I know our listening audience is going to want to ask you about. Sam Williams had a tremendous senior year. Looked like he had a great pro day, and yet I continue to sort of hear the rumblings that he's going to fall in the draft, that he's could fall 3rd round, 4th round. The past stuff just lingers for him. I know you're not Nostradamus here, but what do you sort of envision happening with Sam next week?
Yeah, I think he's a top 100 talent. I mean, right, we saw he's just this hard charging, scheme wrecking defensive end. I think, his game could probably use a little nuance to it, but boy, when you can barrel your way into the backfield the way he did and wreak as much consistent havoc as he did last season. I mean, you led the team in sacks, forced fumbles, tackles for loss, it's just checking off a ton of playmaking boxes. Yeah. The long fumble return for the touchdown he had. I mean, I do think the character stuff is going to be a case-by-case basis. Some teams obviously have a much more sort of liberal approach to that, and they're going to take some, as long as it's not certain types of things. Obviously, the arrest in what was it, 2020, I guess, even if the charges were dropped, there's concern there, similar to what we were talking about for weeks with Deshaun Watson. And so, there'll always be teams that for character reasons are going to be a lot more buttoned up and just say, you know what, if we can't get total sign off on a guy, he's just not going to be on our draft board. So, the fear being something else happens later, right?
Sure, of course.
Teams don't care necessarily. I shouldn't say that. Teams want to know, what have you done before, but are you going to do it in the future, right? And if they hear a guy has changed, that could allow them to open some doors as far as, putting him on their board. But yeah, I think you have him in the right spot. I would say top 100 possibility. But you're right. The talent suggests he should go higher than that. It's also a deep edge class this year, which I think factors in on some level.
Snoop Connor, Jerry and Ely, any chance they hear their names called, or are they looking at free agent deals?
No, I think they are. I mean, again, running back, there are a couple that are staying above the rest, I would say, in that first, second, third round range. But, with Connor, I think he's probably an early to mid day 3 pick, round 5, round 6, something like that, somewhere in that range, I would say. And, obviously the, consistent production for 3 years, even if it was limited carries, I would say that's, a positive for him. And well-built, thick kid. He runs with his pads behind him and runs angry, and there's a role for that. And, I would say his testing numbers were maybe a little bit better than some people expected. I mean, a big bench press number, if I recall. I think there's some times when he gets a little impatient as a runner. I sit there and watch 10 games of him, but there were times when, his instincts might've been open to question. He's not a great receiver, or at least we haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
But day 3 pick, I think absolutely. And who was the other,
Jerry and Ely, the other running back, Jerry. And
yeah. Ely. And I think probably, again, it's going to depend on what you want. He's sort of the total opposite in some ways. He can catch the football. He was a little bit more of a volume back, even at his size. And it's the question of, he has some limitations to his game. I think he's a pretty versatile player. He's got some nice athletic traits. He's just, the size suggests that he's going to be a third down back in the NFL, but his speed wasn't good enough to where you feel, great about projecting him. But he's late day 3, borderline draftable, I would guess, if I had to, just throw that out there.
Let me ask you about one more Ole Miss guy. I did a show with them all fall. Chance Campbell, the linebacker, that transferred from Maryland, was I'm using the word impactful a lot today for some reason. I don't know why. He was quite impactful for Ole Miss's defense. He turned a weakness into a strength for that team. He thought about coming back for another year, decided to go pro while he was healthy. I know he's a day 3, if anything, but do you hear any buzz with him at all in terms of being able to help a team on special teams, play some linebacker? I know he ran a little better than people thought that he would run at the pro day.
Yeah, I sub 4.6, if I recall, which, I think a lot of people sort of viewed him as this little, a little bit of a slower sort of 2-down Mike linebacker or whatever. But, another guy who had some pretty good ball production, stripping the ball loose. And, I think has a history of stripping fumbles away. And, his instincts at the very least, and that speed number will guarantee him a job on special teams, at the very least, maybe a 4th or 5th linebacker spot. And, like you said, I mean, it seems like, he's got the kind of the lacrosse type athleticism that's better than maybe you expect when you watch him play. I think he's a nice player who probably either goes, 7th round PFA. That's if I had to guess. The linebacker position's maybe a little weaker. I think it is. Some people like it, but it gives him a chance to get drafted. But at the very least, he'll be one of the more sought after priority free agents, I think. And then, he checks a lot of boxes, even if he's not an exceptional player as an NFL prospect.
Eric, we've started with quarterbacks. We'll finish with quarterbacks. Just quickly, I'm curious. You talked about Pickett and Willis and Ritter and those guys. How quickly do you envision the first quarterback going off the board next Thursday?
That's the golden ticket question right there. I really don't know. I mean, I think that the conversation at least starts at number 6. Carolina's picking there. They don't have another pick until round 4. That's a big problem. And Scott Fitterer comes from Seattle. He's been there now a couple of years, but his instinct is always going to be to trade back. I think that's in his blood, and I think that's what he wants to do. Will there be an offer? I don't know. If they stay at 6, I think a quarterback would be in play if there's not one of their favorite offensive tackles still sitting there. If they pass, is Seattle at 9 in play? Do we drop down even further than that? I think it's going to be a little lower than some people are imagining right now. I'm not at all thinking that Carolina is locked into a quarterback, because they have the cap space to go after, Jimmy Garoppolo or Baker Mayfield or somebody like that. So I know that, that those aren't going to get people thrilled, but if you don't love somebody, if you don't have conviction over a player, why take him at number 6 and not having another selection for 2 rounds? That's a tough one for me. So Saints, possibly, if things break right for them. Pittsburgh, they could move up. They could stay there 20 and maybe get lucky with one of them. It's really, really hard to say where the run starts. And even for that matter, when the second or third quarterbacks come off.
It's always fun to watch because you can tell teams that are disciplined to their plan. And you can also sometimes tell that a panic happens in a room.
Oh yeah.
And somebody goes, hey, we got to go get our guy. And
the
whole board sort of goes to hell in a handbasket right there, which is what makes it fun. At least that's the way I envision it. And I've talked to people, and it sort of feels like that's the way it works. Hey, thanks for the time. I know you're super busy.
You got it.
Thanks again for doing it, and really encourage people to follow your work at Yahoo.
Yeah, pleasure's mine. A lot of Ole Miss prospects to look at this year, so it'll be fun for your listeners, and always fun for us who, eat, breathe, and drink this stuff year round.
Talk to you soon, my friend.
All right, buddy.
There you go. That was Eric Edholm. I had to switch screens. I apologize. Appreciate his time talking about the NFL draft. Starts next Thursday. We're tentatively planning to do a kind of a first-round watch party on Thursday night for no other reason than to watch Chase suffer through the Saints picks. So we'll talk about that a little bit later next week as we get into draft week. Weekend of SEC baseball is upon us, and talked about that, the Tennessee bat scandal, and more with Chris Lee of Southeastern 14. Here's Chris. Chris Lee of Southeastern14.com, also VandySports.com, kind enough to join us again today. Chris, how are you?
Excellent. You?
I'm good. So I was aware of a story you were working on last week. You published it, I believe, on Friday. Is that right? I think that's right.
Yes, Friday morning.
Yeah, because we talked about it right as I was walking in the knee rehab. So it was about Tennessee and their weekend in Vanderbilt a couple weeks ago when they played a 3-game set there at Vandy. And the Friday game was the night that a bat was confiscated, a home run was taken off the board, tests were taken on the bat. You were able to, through sources, put together what had happened, and you reported on that over the course of a week. I'm curious if you could sort of take us through that story, and then I'd love to talk to you about the reaction that you have and to some degree have not gotten since you reported that story a week ago.
Yeah, I would push back on one thing you said.
Okay.
And I tried to make this clear from the beginning. This is not a so-and-so is cheating story, and that's how it got framed by a lot of people. This is I saw this happen. I heard this kind of thing was going on. I was on the lookout for something like that to happen 2 weekends ago. And by the way, people make assumptions where you get your information. That was not coming out of the Vanderbilt baseball program. That was out there in other circles. Yes. If you were listening to that. And so, but by virtue of doing two things, you get framed as something. And I know we'll get into that later, but I wanted to frame it as, because Neal, you know how it goes. Sometimes you start on a story and you're going, wow, I see this, and that's a story, right?
Sure.
Well, as you dive in, it's got layers, and you're going, oh, I didn't know about this, and I didn't know about that, and I never would have thought to ask for this. And so you peel the onion one layer at a time, and what you're left with at the end of the day was, I think, a college baseball story about whether what's going on matches what's been privately alleged in some circles. I don't know. That's hard for me to say. Probably only God and a few people know for sure, but you look for things and signs like you would in any story. And there's some things that certainly don't add up at times. But to me, the story was, when I dug in, I had evidence of some things that if I were in the NCAA and the SEC, I would want to know. And when I went to the SEC deflected to the NCAA. And when I went to the NCAA, there was an alarming amount of, we really don't care, that disturbed me, because I think above and beyond, because there's other layers to this too. It's a competitive issue, but it's also a safety issue, because And this is why I knew that the minute I wrote that story, it would invite all kinds of stuff. I also know if writing that story somehow indirectly saves, somebody's 8-year-old daughter from getting beamed by a foul ball off a hot bat and killed, then my goodness, if God put me on earth to do that alone, that would have been worth it. Right.
Yeah, sure.
That's
it's when you
story.
told me this, when you told me what you were hearing, and I think I told you this, that was kind of my first thought was, what Ole Miss played, I don't know who was it the other day, Murray State or somebody, Murray State, I think. It was the school kid game, right? Everyone does those, the kid games.
Yeah.
It's 11 a.m. and all the kids, it's springtime and the teachers are done. And it's, let's load them up on buses and take them to a baseball game and let them yell and scream and dance to the music between innings and all that stuff. And it's a lot of fun. But if you ever go to one of those games, and I've been to them at the college level, I've been to them in minor league baseball in Mobile, you also watch and you realize a bunch of people are in the stands and they're not locked into the game. And there's not a ton of reaction time at all. And you don't want anything that reduces that reaction time is bad. Like you go to a baseball game and sometimes someone's looking at his or her phone, or maybe they got a text and they're in the middle of a conversation. Chris, it happened to me at Wrigley a few years ago, and I'm the one who watches games. But I got a text from my son and I was responding to it. And I think it was Javier Baez hit one that went right over my head. And, it was kind of scary. And that was the thing I thought was, well, they're already swinging aluminum. If they're swinging doctored hot aluminum, if you will, well, someone could really get hurt.
Yeah. Well, and here's another thing to peel back before we get into these. And this will get a lot of discussion. I think the bats right now, even if nobody is doing anything illegal, they're hitting balls pretty hard. I mean, I go to games. I saw 112 off the bat yesterday. I don't even think that was an illegal bat. I just think that's the way they hit these days. And, the specs are designed within a certain tolerance. I'm seeing stuff coming off the bats that any tampering aside and stuff like that, I'm just thinking that's kind of dangerous. But, people like offense. The league, I'm sure the NCAA like offense, home runs, sell tickets and sorts of things, all sorts of things like that. But at the end of the day, that whole discussion becomes something else if somebody gets hurt. And I think that's my primary concern. I think even without, and look, if you're coach of a team, right, you can choose certain kinds of bats. And I've seen the NCAA's list of approved bats, and there's all sorts of things on there. But I just wonder if the limits we've set that are legal already are a little scary to me. And that's before we even get into tampering, because I'm seeing how balls come off bats, and I know good and well everybody's not cheating. I don't know how many are, but I think some are. And I think that concerns me, because if you've already got a bat that legally hits the way these things hit at times, and you take it a couple of steps further, you've got danger one way and you've really got danger the next.
So as you watched that unfold on that Friday night, what did you see happen? What were your thoughts? And then kind of take me through the reporting over the course of that weekend.
Well, it's funny the way it unfolded. Again, I'd been having my ear to the ground on some of these things earlier in the week. I think I'd even texted you to ask you, have you heard anything coming out of Ole Miss circles? And I think at that point you were not aware of it. And so my son has got a doubleheader on Friday night, and I'm there watching his game, and I've got Vanderbilt, Tennessee. I'm listening through it through my phone. And as soon as Beck got called out, you could hear the announcers are confused. And I'm thinking, I'm pretty sure I know what this is about. So Saturday I get to the park. I'm half expecting something crazy to happen, like someone to get beamed or there to be a fight or something verbal between the two dugouts. Nothing happened. Sunday, I'm at game 3, and I'm starting to hear some stuff leak out about the bat that got used on Friday night had been tested, and it was well below the PSI limits. And the significance of that is this. If you want to take a bat and do something to it to make it hit better, the bats are constructed in a way it can give a bat what's called a trampoline effect. In other words, the barrel fibers are loosened up, the barrel's a little softer. And so when you hit it, it's almost more like a tennis racket or something that gives it more of a catapult effect. And so that's why balls travel further with tampered bats. And so when I heard that the bat had tested well below the legal level, I'm going, oh my goodness. And I asked the right people who would know. And I even asked people who don't know each other, if you get my drift.
Yeah, sure.
And so from that point, it's a story. I tried to track down umpires after the game to get their comment about the test. They wouldn't comment on it. Come to find out later that, because I thought, I'm thinking as I'm doing this, Neal, surely somebody's going to know whether that bat got into a game by accident, what the story was it hot? Was it not hot? Was it just, somebody didn't sticker a bat that was legal, and grab the wrong one by accident? There's a million ways this can go. And I'm just like, what does this look like? When I find out the PSI number is what it is, I think that's a story. And I'm just assuming at that point that it'll be public information, that the SEC will announce, here's the deal with the bat. It wasn't just the sticker fell off. It was that it was way below the limits. The NCAA would do something. I mean, that's what I'm thinking is common sense. Come to find out, as I ask, the SEC is deflecting to the NCAA. The NCAA is saying, in fact, here was what was really alarming, Neal. When I called the NCAA and emailed them and asked them, they did not know anything about the incident between Vandy or Tennessee, nor did they know about the one with Auburn and A&M the weekend before, where the sticker also, quote unquote, fell off the bat. I'm thinking, okay, if guys are breaking rules and there's potential for tampering, because what people think is happening is that these bats get tested legally before games, but you got an entire different stash of bats in the dugout. And I asked the NCAA this directly, and their honesty was startling. I said, would it be possible for someone to take a bat that wasn't checked and slip it into the game? And the spokesperson gave me the answer, and you can hear him thinking it through on the phone. He says, well, yes, it would be possible, but that would not be following the procedure. Which, yeah, and I'm thinking my jaw just about hits the floor.
It's the true believers that run the place. It's what you try to explain to fans, and this is going to come across for you all listening or watching as me being condescending. I feel like Mike Bianco here for a minute. This is not condescending. Until you deal with these people,
yes,
you don't really understand what those of us who have ever dealt with them are talking about.
Yeah.
These people are true believers in the most academic sense of the word. It's sort of like when you deal with people who've lived in academia their entire lives.
Yes.
They really don't have any concept or constructs of the real world. They just live in an ideology. And a lot of the people that make decisions and make policy and make rulings at the NCAA level, they have an inability to take a math problem, for example, and apply it to the real world. No, they just take the numbers and they just make it work. And they look at it and they think, well, we have this rule book and everyone follows these rules. And they're almost stunned when they find out that, no, someone slept on a couch for 2 nights. Well, you can't do that. That's a penalty. And that's kind of how they operate. And in this case, it's, well, I mean, no one would, we sticker the bats on Thursday, and those are the bats that are put into play, and you use those bats on Friday, and everyone has a grand old time. And that's genuinely how those people sort of think. So when I read your story, I wasn't particularly surprised at that reaction.
Well, and I get what you're saying, but you can hear stuff, and sometimes it feels like urban legend until you're on the other end of the phone.
I know.
And it's, it's not just the words, it's the tone of voice. And, at one point the phrase, "I don't like your line of questioning" was used. And, the poor guy on the other end of the phone was a nice guy. He was kind enough to give me his time. He was very honest about stuff.
Kudos to him. Sure.
But I mean, I'm thinking I should not be telling you your news that you had 2 major bat incidents should not be coming from me. It
Right.
should have been coming from someone in College Station and someone in Nashville. And it probably should have been coming from an umpiring crew, or really it probably should have been coming from the umpires to the SEC, then to the NCAA. I mean, find some chain of command, but the fact that this bat was just going to go, I mean, they take the bat and they don't, frankly, the NCAA told me this straight up. They don't care what it reads. That's the procedure. And if somebody does a private test on it and they find that it can hit a ball, 500 miles an hour. They don't care because it's their procedure and it's in the hands of the people, the coaches and the players to follow the rules. And that's that, end of story. And to the extent to which, and I'll go further, Neal, and we write stories and that people that we talk about have families, they have kids, they have moms, they have dads.
Sure.
To borrow a phrase, they put their pants on one leg at a time like the rest of us. And I'm going, I know how this is going to read. And so I'm thinking a couple days later, because I'm still working on stuff, and I'm going, all right, now that they've had a couple days to let this marinate a little bit, I'm going to send them a question from a different angle. And I did this to the SEC too. I said, hey, I know this is a difficult topic, but as well as I know, if a bat is found to be hot, if something happens and someone gets killed, a player, somebody in the dugout, a fan, somebody gets killed, there's going to be lawsuits. And when people file a lawsuit like that, I didn't say it this way, they're naming anybody and everybody. And what I said was, I'm sure you have thought through the liability portion of this. So knowing what I have asked, knowing pretty much what I'm going to write, knowing the information I have, I've kind of put it all out on the table. Now that you've had a couple nights to sleep on it, how might that be different when I phrase it in terms of liability? I sent that to the SEC. My email was empty all day till late in the afternoon when they give me another statement. It's pretty generic. I'm getting referred to the NCAA again. Send them the same thing. Several hour delay, I get a statement from somebody else. And in the statement, and this is in my story, you can see the two sentences I bolded because they didn't have to tell me. I mean, those things just jump off the page. Basically says the coaches are supposed to certify that all their equipment is legal. So I don't know how you else you interpret that as if there's a lawsuit, it's on you, the coach, in the dugout of the defending team, liability's on you. I find that incredible, but apparently that's where we are.
And the stickers don't fall off. The stickers don't fall off.
Let me correct you.
Okay.
I've since found out that it has been alleged that those stickers can fall off with a good bit of soap and hot water.
Okay, so you can,
which would then make them probably tough to reattach, but they're not. The stickers are not designed to fall off.
But those are stickers. That's not getting a sticker to fall off. That's removing a sticker. Those are two different things. Because how often does one soap and water his or her baseball bat?
Right.
I mean,
you get where this is going.
I've played baseball.
I know we had hats for bats. Now maybe we have washes for them too. But
I guess it's possible that Pedro Serrano washes his bat as a way of clean. I did see the other day where Shohei Ohtani gave his bat CPR. So I guess it is conceivable, right? Conceivable, but it is unlikely,
right?
So all that aside, the story ran. I thought it was a really good story. It was met with some people because I think some people wanted a smoking gun, and I kind of thought there were some smoking guns in it, if I'm totally honest. But I'm curious, what was the reaction from people in college baseball to the story, if there was one?
I sent it to everybody that I interviewed for the article. I didn't get a response back. I put it out on Twitter. I made it a point. Like, there's just some things you just don't want to know. I took my phone to a couple people, said, hey, look through my direct messages, look through my mentions. Tell me if there's something I need to respond to. Other than that, I don't want to know. Because I know what it was and I know where it was coming from. And again, I've always told people, like, if you're going to look at the article, read the whole thing. Because the whole thing is that, people took bits and pieces and said, you said this and you said that. You shouldn't have said that. Well, this, well, that. I'm like, no, you didn't read the story. And I don't have time to respond to those people.
Right.
I do know that it got more views. It'd been read about 3,500 times as of a couple of days ago. I think the number's probably a lot higher than that. I think it's going to get some traction somewhere, but who knows? Frankly, what needs to happen is somebody's a bigger fish than me needs to pick up on it. But because I think in addition to safety, you've got competitive things. And okay, Neal, here's the thing. What happens if somebody breaks a story tomorrow that takes it further than what I did? And now there's enough pressure on the NCAA to say, okay, well, we got to do something for a bunch of reasons. Let's say that you played a schedule that was front loaded with teams that were tampering with bats and you got underwater in the league.
Yeah.
Your second half looks a lot different, but maybe it's not enough to get you into the tournament, under normal circumstances.
Lose a job. Yeah. Stuff like that.
Lose a job.
Sure.
I mean, the draft's coming up. What if you're a kid that's doing it on the up and up and 10 guys go before you that aren't? I mean, other than safety, there's a million reasons people need to look into this, but I just worry about, because you already saw some interesting things since then in some games. I'll just leave it at that. You probably know what I'm talking about.
Tennessee Tech beat Tennessee, I guess it was Tuesday night in a game that was played at was it Pringles Park or Smokies Park or whatever.
Yeah.
They used wood bats, and those guys don't play with wood bats frequently. You can cork a wood bat, but it's harder to do. It's wood bats, I think, are more true. They're more expensive. It's why colleges don't use them. But I thought it was interesting that Tennessee, this team that has beaten the ball about the yard all year, everywhere they've played, everywhere they've gone, didn't do much offensively swinging wood. In fact, I think they lost 3-2 or 3-1 or 2-1, something like that. They only had a handful of hits. They only scored a run or two. They lost the game. They haven't lost many games. They hadn't lost in 30 games. They're undefeated in league play. And again, this isn't to take away from Tennessee. They're a terrific team.
And they really are.
They really are.
Yeah.
Load of good pitching. Vitello has that team playing with a chip on its shoulder. They play with a swagger. I think there's an intimidation factor that they present. They're very athletic. They're a very, very, very good team. And they went to Omaha a year ago, and they are certainly a favorite to get to Omaha again this year. So this is not to say that they're cheating or that they wouldn't be good if they hadn't had this scandal about them, because I think they would be. But it was interesting that happened, and their offense in one game, which is an incredibly small sample size, but in one game, the offense sort of disappeared.
Well, and there were some sticker checks on the Sunday game, from what I understand. I was also told Missouri had a bat that broke in half during the game.
Oh,
I did not see it. I'm taking somebody's word for it. And see, that's another thing. I've seen some strange things with bats this year. I've seen an end cap come flying off. I've seen another bat break in half. Those are things that can happen when there's bat. By the way, neither of those involve Tennessee. Those are things that can happen when bats are tampered with. There are also things that sometimes happen with particular makes and models. I was told that, I can't remember which bat it was. One bat's got an issue with the end cap comes falling off, but sometimes if you have tampered with the end cap to end load it or shave it, that will fall off. If you shave the inside of a bat enough, it can break like that. Again, that doesn't imply that when that happens, that's what it is. But if you've got your eyes open for some stuff, I would tell people when you watch a game, especially if you're at it, keep an eye on dugouts and just some things like that you might not normally watch for. Because I'll tell you another thing I saw a couple of weeks ago. I saw a game where balls were being fouled off towards a dugout. Player would pick up the ball, sniff it, pass it on to somebody else. They'd sniff it.
Yeah.
You're starting to see some stuff like that. You're starting to hear some whispers of substances and things like that put on baseballs, which at the major league level, that's been like a huge story for 2 years. So there's no reason it wouldn't come down. I mean, at least the NCAA has the facade of a sticker check that it doesn't use. That's the other thing. I said to them, why don't you guys just have the umpires check the sticker? That'd put a lot of this to rest. Well, that's not part of protocol. It would require rules change, and we don't like to do that. Which is just crazy. I mean, all you're doing is telling the umpire, look at the sticker. They don't have glove checks after games, like you have at the major league level.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be that hard. I don't know
so much of this is with baseball. And
Yeah.
Listen, people aren't going to like this, but the season starts in the middle of February.
Yeah.
And it goes all the way through March. What do you think the NCAA is focused with in February and March?
Well, March Madness.
They got the men's tournament, the women's tournament. The men's tournament is where they make all their money. They're very focused on the women's tournament now as well. They've taken some criticism for things that have happened with the women's tournament. Their resources from an attention standpoint in late February and all of March are on basketball. and baseball just flies under the radar. And I kind of read that into some of the response, which was, well, no, we haven't checked on that. We don't have time for that. I mean, we've got these regionals in Spokane and Raleigh and Greensboro and Seattle and Austin. And, we've got 4 coming up in LA and Phoenix and whatever. And we got the Final Four is going to be in New Orleans, and we've already got advanced teams there, and we've got COVID protocols and all this other stuff. And so you've got all that going on. I just think it just kind of goes under the radar a little bit. And then I'll say this also in defense of Tennessee. Anyone who thinks that Tennessee is the only team that is doctoring their bats it's
very mistaken.
Yes. There's a reason that people know what they're looking for and to some degree know what they're smelling for. It's and they know what it sounds like. That's the thing, is you hear the rumblings when it's the sound. They're around balls hitting aluminum a lot. And so they know, they know the sound. I mean, it's like if you listen to Major League Baseball, if you're just listening to it, not watching it, you can listen to a game and tell when a ball is struck hard as opposed to when a ball breaks a bat, for example. There's a sound that it makes. Well, these people are around that all the time. They know the sounds. And so when something sounds funny, their antenna go up.
Well, and the other thing that bat tampering does is the sweet spot of the bat's a lot larger. So you don't have to barrel a ball to get it out of the park. And which is, try pitching to that. Good luck. I mean,
sure.
A pop-up turns into 3 rows into the seats, and that's the other issue you're having.
Yeah, unlike with wood, where if you get it in on the handle, you break the bat.
Right.
A hitter, you get that late movement that changes a double in the gap to a weak ground ball to the pitcher. I mean, it's because of where it hits on the bat, because you're not shaving the inside of a wood bat, obviously.
Yeah.
All right. I do want to, so this it will be quick here because I want to get to the SEC schedule, because we're getting to the part of the year where after this week, it'll be the halfway mark and everyone will have played 5 weekends and all of that. The response that you got was, oh, you're just a Vanderbilt guy.
Yeah.
And to me, this is why I tell people in journalism, or I get frustrated about the state of journalism today, and this will be very short. Tribalism makes it where no one has credibility.
Yep.
And look, this is college baseball, college basketball stuff. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, not really impacting much of anything. But it's why I always fight that reputation. People, like, do you run a fan site? No, I don't. I don't like that word, because that word implies that, oh, you're a fan serving fans, and so you serve propaganda. And once you accept that role, that's who you are.
Yeah. Well, Neal, you and I have known each other for what, 15 years or close to that?
Yeah, before I was in this role. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have not known you as well as I have the last few years, but you know a lot of guys that cover a lot of beats. Do you know anybody that has ticked off the school they cover more often than I have the last 2 years?
No. No.
I mean, it's just been, that's the irony of this, is it's been one thing after another. Now, I think it's finally hit a point where, a truce has sort of been declared.
You're not getting a Christmas card from the people at Vanderbilt Athletics.
I think they finally understood that this guy's got a job to do. And somebody said, hey, wait a minute. There aren't many people that bother to cover us, period. You may not. I think that some common sense has prevailed, but that's the irony, is I have not carried the water. I've written things that I know had to have hurt them in recruiting. But when something's in front of you and it's obvious, I think that that's your job. And I think that's your job when, something happens, right in front of you, and it may not be the team you cover too. And that's the way I've tried to approach it.
Well, and I'm saying, before we move on completely, I'll say this for you. In addition to contacting the NCAA and the SEC, you gave Tennessee every opportunity to comment as well.
Sure.
And there's a lot of people in modern journalism that's not the case. That it's tribalism. You see it all the time. Fox News, MSNBC, CNN. The list goes on. The New York Post, the New York Times, for God's sake. is just a lot of tribalism in journalism where there's not a lot of fairness. And I thought you handled that story with remarkable fairness. You gave everyone an opportunity to say, no, Chris, this is total bullshit. What you're saying, it's totally wrong. And here's why. And had they, you would have written that. The fact that nobody told you, no, it's completely wrong. The bat was checked out and it was fine. Nothing was wrong. It was just a coincidence. And there wasn't a sticker. And so we had to call the hitter out. There was nothing. We checked into everything. There was nothing else there. It's a no story, and you're wrong to be pursuing the story. And no one told you that.
No, nobody denied anything. I told them exactly what I knew. Would you like to dispute that? Would you like to give me your side of the story? And, I could have published a story about something like that on Monday or Tuesday. I wanted to make sure I had it buttoned down. I had it right, that there wasn't some variable that I wasn't thinking of. And you reach a point where you've got to hit publish because you're never going to think of everything. And like I said, the one that I learned afterwards was the stickers technically can come off, but if you're doing that, it's also tampering. So if you want to be technically
fall
correct,
off because the wind blew. That's my point.
No,
and they don't
for
blow
people
off because someone touched them with a batting glove. It takes work to
right.
get them off.
Well, and just so people know, you have to get these things off with a razor blade under normal circumstances. So
Yes.
I took my time. You know that, and this is the part I don't like too. When there is something going on like this, everybody's sort of under a cloud of suspicion if there's no handle on it. And that's the hard part too. It's like the Hall of Fame elections in baseball. You got the guys they don't let in because of steroids. You got the guys that get let in that it's like, well, we think maybe, but we can't prove it, so we'll let you in. And it's thrown everything in chaos. And that's what you don't want to see happen with the game, because I think college baseball really has a very good product.
Yeah, I do too. I've watched a lot of it this year. Speaking of, let's get into the weekend series. A lot of Thursday through Saturday series because of Easter. Texas A&M, who's been kind of plucky, I think is the right word, kind of gritty. They play Georgia in Athens. Georgia with the pitching injury now with their ace. What do you make of that series and of those two teams as they hit the halfway point here?
Well, Cannon's been maybe the best pitcher in the league, and they have had real trouble after him, which is surprising because from what I'd heard, their pitching was going to be really deep. And their lineup was a thing people had a question about. Well, they're hitting the tar out of the ball lately, which is not totally unexpected because that's an old lineup. But I think that what they've been able to do is bludgeon teams sometimes when Cannon's not pitching, and then he's good enough on other days. I worry that they're pitching that they've given up a lot of runs. They've given up 190, which is a lot for a good SEC pitching staff. I think they're overperforming. I think if Cannon's out, that's a totally different team. A&M has been hard to know what to do with, but they've been better since conference play. They've got a little bit of pitching too. I think just about every series is interesting every week because I think there's a lot more parity than we thought we'd have. I think that
there's no real bottom of the league. That's what's interesting.
There's not, and Tennessee is the one team that's just running away with it, and then you've got a step down to Arkansas and whoever else, probably LSU. And then you got a bunch of teams from there that any given weekend, you just don't know. I mean, you saw it last weekend. Alabama swept Ole Miss in Oxford. So if they lose Cannon, though, that's huge.
So I'm going to pick A&M to get 2 in Athens.
Let's see. Georgia has won both home series. 5-1.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm still going with A&M. I think I'm going with chaos. All right. 2, 4, and 8 teams. You just mentioned Ole Miss. They go to South Carolina. The Rebels just have really struggled. They've been pretty good on the road. 4-2 on the road. They took 2 out of 3 at Auburn. They took 2 out of 3 at Kentucky. They are 0-6 at home this year. So they're probably glad to not see Swayze this weekend. South Carolina also 4-8 has been, I think Chase's word was schizophrenic. I've watched them play a few times and it's where the proof that sample sizes don't fit in baseball. I probably watched them play 3 times, and every time I watch them, I'm kind of impressed. And then I look up and I see their number and it's not there. obviously a huge weekend for both teams. The loser of this series, the math starts getting hard.
Yeah, I'm shocked Ole Miss hasn't been better. And I think Ole Miss has gotten a little bit unlucky. I still think, despite the way they played, I like them to win that series. Sanders is really good, potential major leaguer. And they've got kind of an old part of the lineup too, which makes it tricky. And they've also played a tough schedule. But I just, to me, Ole Miss that's a water eventually rises to its own level. And I just think Ole Miss is due to play better.
Yeah, they just got to figure the pitching out. They when you don't have an ace, and they don't. When you don't have an ace, it's problematic. Two teams that have lost their ace square off in Fayetteville this weekend. LSU really starting to play well. Arkansas just lost a series for the first time. It was either 13 or 14 series. I can't remember which. They lost 2 out of 3 at Florida in what was a weird series. Arkansas won game 1 in a blowout, kind of got blown out in game 2, and then game 3 was one of those nail biters both ways. I'm a little higher on LSU than a lot of people, and I've watched Arkansas several times this year, and the word I use for them is just kind of fine. They're fine. They're good. They're solid. They're Chili's. You know, Chili's. It's better than Applebee's, but it's just Chili's. Kind of what's who they are. Am I wrong, or am I underestimating one of these teams?
I think you're underestimating them both a little bit
Okay.
because they both pitched better than we thought. Arkansas has been a lot better. I mean, I think that was the thing when Paulette went down. You're going, boy, who do they have? And they've been pretty good out of the rotation. They've been really solid in the bullpen. LSU's been better pitching.
They have
than I thought it would have, and especially probably after from the second month on, they've had some real defensive issues. I think they're starting to get a little bit better there. But I mean, with that lineup, Neal, they don't have to get outstanding pitching. They just have to get good pitching. And I think
just got to have pitching keeps you in the game.
Yeah, I mean, you might look up the end of the year, and Tennessee, like I said, is on its own level right now. But I think LSU's got a pretty good chance to be number 2. But Arkansas, right? I would still say Arkansas is the second best team in the league. The thing with them is Robert Moore and some of those kids that we thought would hit have not had those kind of seasons. So I think they've still got a little left in the tank more than what they've shown.
Okay. Got that one. Let's see. What was the other one? I try to get ahead of myself here, because a couple of series don't start until Friday. Kentucky and Missouri in Columbia. 2 teams that aren't bad.
No,
they're not good, but they're not bad. And they have bothered people, and now they play each other, and probably not a whole lot to say there. I don't know that either one of these 2 teams have enough to make a tournament run, although their RPIs aren't terrible.
I'm at the point that, like, unless Tennessee's involved, I just almost go with the home team. That's kind of where this league is right now. Kentucky has really hit the ball well, but the pitching, after a couple of guys, is suspect. Missouri has got a little bit more pitching depth than I thought. It's hit the ball better. I would go with Missouri, but I think that's a pretty evenly matched series.
All right, here's an interesting one. Mississippi State's lost 5 of its last 6 league games. They got a Sunday game at Arkansas in extra innings that almost went against them, but they got it. And I thought, well, maybe that's going to be a catalyst for them. And then they go to Baton Rouge and get swept. Auburn, meanwhile, pretty good right now. They're finding ways to win games, but they got to go 2 start. Well, is this a chance for State to get well, or is it too late?
I keep thinking State's better than it's shown. Same with Ole Miss. Lineup's pretty good. The pitching's been the issue for the reasons everybody knows. They've been just hit really hard with injuries. I kind of like them to win some high-scoring games. I think if they can solve, like Joseph Gonzalez on Sunday was really good through a bunch of off-speed stuff. I don't know how they hit that, but he just completely shut down Vanderbilt with just pounding the zone with off-speed things. That might be the wild card, but again, I'm kind of going home team all of these. Let's have a good reason not to. I think State's due to play better without the injuries, but they're starting to get close to that point where they're going to run out of time too.
Can Alabama get one in Knoxville?
Yeah, I think so. I think they can. I think Alabama's playing really well, and Tennessee has not scored nearly as many runs. all the stuff we talked about aside, you cannot go 31-2 forever. That series would be more interesting if it's in Tuscaloosa, but gosh, Alabama just swept Ole Miss on the road, took one at State. Playing away from home has not been an issue. So it feels to me like Tennessee is due to lose a game, or who knows, maybe even two here. I probably wouldn't go two, but I think Alabama can get a game.
Mentioned Florida earlier. I thought it was big for them because I thought on Thursday night last week when they lost to Arkansas, I think it was 8-1 or something like that. I thought, boy, their season's kind of on the brink right now. Like you drop both of these next games or one of these next two games, especially if you lose them both. Let's say Arkansas had swept them. You're Florida. I don't know you recover from that. Their body language was not great on Thursday night on that SEC Network game, but they bounced back and they got a big win on Saturday, like I mentioned, on Friday, I should say, and then a kind of a dramatic win on Saturday where they got to Arkansas's bullpen late and won the series 2-1. Now they got to go to Vanderbilt, and I keep waiting for Vanderbilt to sort of play to its talent level, and so far they haven't. Vanderbilt's kind of prospect heavy right now, but they're not putting it together. You'll be there in Nashville. What do you expect out of that series?
Man, that's a great one. That used to be about as good as any rivalry in the SEC. In fact, Florida was Vanderbilt's biggest rival until Tennessee has stepped up in the last couple of years. That series is always chippy. Florida's got big issues with pitching after Hunter Barco, but it's really hit the ball well. And I know some of that's helped by their park, but Judd Fabian's been more like the Judd Fabian we thought we'd get. Wyatt Langford's been really good. They're getting some power out of the catcher spot. Vandy just hadn't clicked yet. They watched too many strikes. I have a feeling they're going to be more aggressive. They hit 3 home runs in a midweek game yesterday. I talked to Tim Corbin after it. He admitted they needed to be better in earlier counts, not to get behind and attack the fastball more. Again, I'll go with the home team, but if you're Vanderbilt, you're a little bit concerned because Florida's a team that can come in and get in your head. And when you've lost 7 of 8 in the SEC like Vandy, that's not the most mentally strong they've ever been. I think just the fact that I think Vanderbilt's got more pitching depth is going to come in handy, but that one will be fun to watch.
Later this summer, I'm going to get you on and we're going to dive into football. So I'm not going to do that now, but just a real quick thing with Vanderbilt. And I appreciate all the insight on baseball. Just with Vanderbilt football, they were been so bad the last few years that I think people look at them and go, W. Is this a season where teams can look at Vanderbilt on the schedule and go, that's a win? Or do you think Clark Lee has a chance to pull off a surprise or two this year?
I think the talent level is still not anywhere near what it needs to be, but you can see them slowly getting a little bit better. It's funny. We had a thing with him the other day, an off the record media session. I asked him a question because he talked about how they're improving. I said, well, how much can you improve based on your talent? And he said, come in here. I want to show you guys something. He then took us in their film room for an hour, a bunch of us in media. I've never had a coach do this, and he did this. And I don't think this happens anywhere, but he went and they had cut-ups of plays that they ran in practice a year ago and last fall and showed how they ran the same play and said, now these guys know to do this instead of that. You can see where we've coached this. You can tangibly see the things that they have made on film. You can see practices a little bit cleaner. They're pretty good about not doing the stupid things that would get penalties and procedures and things like that. He's cleaned it up. Now, it's not an SEC talented team, but just by the fact that they're Vanderbilt, people aren't going to take them seriously. I think they're going to battle you. I think they're going to really pride themselves on being physical and hitting you. And it may not be a game that you just want to play because you're expected to win, but I think they'll get after you. And I think they've cleaned up some of the stuff. Now, do I think they'll win a game in the league? No. But sometimes you see a team's season fall apart. You see 3 or 4 teams in the league every year that just get crushed under the weight of expectations, and they're mailing it in at season's end, and kids are already got one foot out the door in the transfer portal and stuff like that. I think by the end of the year, they're getting better. I think there's a lot more buy-in, and I don't think it's the rubber stamp win that'll be a year ago, even though I still probably would not pick them to win a game in the league.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I've kind of heard that from some people that you could tell there was a little more buy-in and I think he's an impressive guy.
Yeah.
I was impressed with because I think they played Ole Miss late in the season last year, and they had every reason in the world to just go, whatever. Name your score. Let's get this over with. And they didn't. I thought they really competed that night. I mean, made it tense a little bit for a while. And Ole Miss got the win, and it was fine. And Ole Miss was pointing towards something else. But still, I thought I was impressed with it. And I've had people tell me, yeah, that's kind of who he is. And
yeah.
If I had someone tell me they're going to get somebody this year, I don't know who, but they're going to get somebody this year. They're going to win a game in the league. They're going to upset somebody, and it's going to be because someone comes in and goes, because the coach I was talking to was like, look, you can tell kids all week, hey guys, but they're kids, and they've seen the scores and they see the record and they go, we're a 27.5 point favorite or whatnot. We're going to win. The coaches are full of it. They're just doing coach stuff. And then by the time the kids realize, oh God, we've got a game on our hands, it's too late. And so anyway, as was said about Vanderbilt, was like, hey, they're going to be bad and they're going to lose a whole bunch of games, but they're going to get somebody because he's got them moving in the right direction. So interesting you say that, because it sort of jives with what I was told.
Yeah, they're going to try to moneyball it. And I think I've talked to them a little bit about what that approach looks like. They're really bright. They're very, very bright. Now, that can only take you so far. But case in point to what you said, they had no business being within 2 touchdowns of anybody. Last year, they got a lead on South Carolina. Carolina gets the ball back with, a minute and a half left on their 8 and goes down the field and scores inside the final few seconds to win. So they were that close a year ago, which didn't seem like much at the time. And then you saw the way Carolina played the rest of the way, and that was a pretty good football team. So I think they're in a more competitive position this year. Another thing, if Ken Seals is their starter, he had about 3 different injuries last year that really hurt him. He's looked better in fall camp. I don't know if he's going to, or in spring ball. I don't know if they'll start Mike Wright, who's more mobile, but you can see them getting better at that position, and that's a big thing too.
Chris, appreciate all the time. Really do. Thanks so much. Great work on that story. I appreciate all that you do. How can people follow your work over the course of the week?
Yeah, go to southeastern14.com. We'll have our written stuff there. We've also got a YouTube channel that's kind of blown up. We haven't done as much lately. We were doing 5 days a week in season. There'll be more of that, and those are the best ways to find us.
That's Chris Lee with Vandy Sports. Thanks, my friend. Appreciate you.
You bet. Thank you.
Again, our thanks to Chris Lee for his time on the show today. Wanted to make sure we got this out to you guys, at least in video form. If you wanted to watch it before the baseball series gets started tonight in Columbia, it's Ole Miss and South Carolina getting things started on Thursday night. One of, I think, 5 SEC series that get started this evening. So enjoy the weekend. We will have football content to you on Saturday. Ole Miss's scrimmage at Vaught-Hemingway Stadium. Some recruiting content coming your way, I hope. Also, a lot of 24, 25, and even a couple of 26 prospects in town. Not a lot of the 23 guys. I think this is going to be much more heavy on that next week for the Grove Bowl. We'll have coverage of baseball throughout the weekend. I'll have 10 weekend thoughts up to you on Sunday evening as well. Enjoy the college baseball series. Enjoy the NBA playoffs, which get rolling for real on Saturday. And enjoy your weekend. Happy Easter if you're traveling. Be safe. And we will talk to you on Monday on the Oxford Exxon podcast. Until then, again, our thanks to Eric Edholm. Our thanks to Chris Lee. And please make sure that when you have heating and air needs that you get in touch with the people at Comer Heating and Air, Southern Air Conditioning and Heating. That's what makes shows like this one possible. Have a great weekend. Take care.